This reading is from John chapter 19, verses 17 to 27. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Here they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews," but this man claimed to be the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled, which said, "They divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." So this is what the soldiers did. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home.
Later, knowing that all was now completed, and so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked the sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be the special Sabbath. Because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you may believe. These things happened so that scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones would be broken, and the other scripture says, "They will look on the one that they have pierced."
300 years or more since that hymn was written, and it still has the words still have such power. And I can remember singing that hymn since I was a kid. And I just thought of the first line, "When I survey the wondrous cross." I thought, well, what does it mean to survey the cross of Jesus? Survey, as we know, means to look over the parts or features, to look at broadly. This is some of the dictionary definitions: to look at or examine or carefully appraise. To have a comprehensive view. To determine the boundaries or elevations of lands or structures. So it's about looking at the whole scene. So think about it. When a surveyor surveys a block of land, say a building's going to be built there, he wouldn't do his job if he didn't look at what was happening on around it, what's happening either side, what's behind, what's in front, what's below in the soil, and all of those things are important. So what happens when we survey the cross of Jesus? It's important to do that. It's important to do what a surveyor would do, to look at the cross, not just in isolation, but what's before, what's after, what's around. Because when people look at the cross in isolation, just take the cross and not consider what goes before, it seems like failure. If you look at the cross in isolation, we could conclude that Jesus failed in his mission. He got himself killed. It was a failure. Because death, and particularly the worst kind of death possible in that era, the most harshest, cruelest kind of death reserved only for the hardened criminals, the low life of society, then he failed. He messed up. But when we take a broader view, when we survey the cross in the context of the whole history of God relating to his people, we see something very different. When we look at the wider plan, we see something different. So when we survey this cross in the context of biblical history, what do we see? We see the motivation comes down to one word: love. Love. You see, as I said, if we look at it in isolation, we think, well, Jesus was not successful, he failed. But you see, the heart and motivation of God was not success by the world's definition of success. God was not wanting to succeed by our definition of success. That was not his motivation. His motivation was love. God's motivation was always love. However, until Jesus came, it was love from above. It was love that God created the world. It was for love that God created the world. In the beginning of time, God had a dream motivated by love. And this amazing creation came about, motivated by love. He created a world that was majestic. He created a beautiful world. He created beautiful creatures. He created beautiful human beings who were the crown of his creation. He created a world that would be majestic, a world that would be in harmony. Such was God's love for us, though, that he gave us freedom to choose whether we would live in this harmony or reject this harmony. And of course, we chose rejection. But God continued to love us, even though this beautiful world that God created got messed up. Because instead of choosing to live in that motivation of love and harmony and unity and working together to fulfill God's plan for his creation, human beings chose to look after themselves, to focus on themselves. It became I want. Even then, God continued to love us, even in the midst of the destruction that happened. As we read through the Bible, as we read through the disasters, as we read of the tragedies that happened through the human race, God continued to love. When God rescued the people of Israel from slavery, it was love that motivated him. It was love that motivated him. When the Passover, when the blood of the Passover lamb was painted on the doorpost, that was a sign. The blood of the lamb was a sign. You belong to God. You belong to God. And it was motivated by love that he rescued them. But it wasn't working. It wasn't working. God's relationship with his people through the law, executed from above, wasn't working. God had a greater plan. Percolating in his heart was an even greater plan. And this greater plan meant God was going to demonstrate not just love from above, but love from below. You see, till this point, until Jesus came, it was God's love for his people, gracious and compassionate, always loving, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. But it was love from above. God's love was demonstrated when he rescued people from above, when he parted the Red Sea from above, when he did all those sovereign signs when he passed over the people. These were signs of love from above. In other words, the people knew God loved them, but it was like a love from a distance. It was a supernatural love. It was a love they couldn't identify with because it was an eternal love. It was a heavenly love. It was an all-powerful, all-knowing love. But that all changed when Jesus came to earth. Now it was not love from above, but love from below. It was like God said, imagine if my people experienced my love through ways that they experience love. Imagine if my people not experience my love for just coming from heaven, but experience my love through ways they could appreciate, they could identify with. Imagine if people experience my love coming through human joy, human sadness, human grief, human pain, human rejection, human anger. And that's what Jesus did. When God chose to allow his Son, who had been with him from eternity, to come to earth in human form, to be born in human form and experience human birth and experience human childhood and yet still be God, made like us in every way, he was loving with a love that we connect with, and yet he was not loving in the way that we love. He was still God. He was loving God's way, yet through human channels, through human means. And that was very, very confronting. That was very confronting with people. Because he was Jesus loving God's way, he was loving people who were outcasts. He was loving people who belonged to different religions. He was accepting people who weren't accepted, like the Samaritan woman. A woman, B, a Samaritan, the wrong religion, the wrong gender for a male Jew to talk to. He was breaking through these barriers. That's God's love, breaking through barriers, but in human ways, through a human. When he was hanging around with sinners and partying with them, that was very confronting. Loving in a human way, but for people that religion said you should not love. When accepting people with great compassion who were outcasts, known as lepers because of their sickness. Loving with human love. But you see, the religious people of the day didn't like love from below. Love from below is very confronting. See, love from above is easier because that's God and he's up in his heaven and he's different from us and he will do it and he will love his way and we will love our way. We will choose who we love and we will choose who we hate. We will choose who we will accept and we will choose who we reject. And God will do it his way, from his love from above, but we will do it our way. But when God chose through Jesus to love from below, he messed all that up. And that was very confronting to religious people because God was loving people. We said, no, we reject them. God was loving people who humans were hating. God was accepting people who humans were rejecting. God was showing compassion on people we wanted to be distant from. It was very confronting. Love from below is very confronting to religious people, as it was then, as it is today. Love from below does our head in. There is so much hate and violence happening in the world today. Not only in Belgium, not only in France. You see, this is where love from below is very confronting. It's horrible what's happened in Belgium. It's horrible what happened in Paris. But you see, love from below is very confronting for us. Because love from below challenges. Why we're hearing days about what happened in Belgium when the same thing can happen in Africa and we hear nothing. Or just a quick headline. Or Russia. Or other poorer parts of the world that don't mean as much for us. Love from below cries out for the destruction that happens every day. The violence every day, the murder of innocent people that have every day in parts of Africa and South America. The ones that don't make to the headlines. And love from below is very challenging for followers of Jesus. Because love from below doesn't first ask, are you Christian or are you Muslim or are you Hindu or are you New Age or are you atheist? Love from below loves before it asks questions. And when love pushes through, the questions don't matter. Love from below challenges my first need to be right and defend me and say why I'm different from you. Love from below is so sacrificial, so other-focused. It is very confronting. It is very confronting. Love from below totally cuts through issues that we make issues out of our own need for security and our own need to protect what we're comfortable with and who we're comfortable being around. When it's love from above, it says that's up to God and doesn't affect me. But when we see love from below, love flowing through human form as Jesus demonstrated, that does our head in. Love from below, love expressed through human eyes, through human voices, through human arms, through human legs, through human hearts. That's challenging. And it's sacrificial. Because the real crunch here, what Jesus demonstrated is this love was so powerful that it's a love through which he chose to lose himself. He lost himself. It was a love through which Jesus gave up that which is most precious to us, life. He gave it up because he chose to do so in love. And you see, in laying down his life for those he loved, Jesus redefined the meaning of both life and love. He redefined the meaning of both. Life is now an expression of love. That's the defining expression of life, demonstrated through love from below. That's why John says in his letters, he who does not know God, love does not know God, because God is love. And Jesus demonstrated that. You see, when we keep it from love from above and don't allow love to mess with our definitions of love, we can protect ourselves and defend ourselves and keep ourselves safe. But when we choose to love as Jesus loved, really embrace a journey of loving from below, of loving with that love, it's not about saving ourselves. It's about risking losing ourselves for the sake of the other. And that is very challenging, very confronting. But do you know what? It's also very freeing. Have you ever thought about what John said in John 1 John 4 verse 18 when he said, there is no fear in love because perfect love casts out all fear? Why do we hang on? Why do we have to prove we're right? Why do we have to be different? Why do we have to knock others? Why do we have to put others down? Why do we have to condemn? Why do we have to do that? Often it's fear. Fear that we will lose ourselves. Fear that something about me will be compromised. But the more we're able to grow in a love from below, a love modelled by Jesus, the less we've got to lose anyway. And the more secure we become in his love, the less we have to defend ourselves. So when we survey the wondrous cross in this broader context, we don't see failure, we see perfect fullness. We don't see defeat, we see accomplishment. We don't see tragedy, we see triumph that will fully be recognised in the resurrection. And what I'm saying now is only half the story. Because yes, we lose ourselves, but look what we gain. What we gain when we allow ourselves to be lost in life and allow the new creation to flow within us, that's so much better. But that's for Sunday. I love this quote from A.W. Tozer. He said, salvation was bought not by Jesus' fist, but his nail-pierced hands. Not by muscle, but by love. Not by vengeance, but by forgiveness. Not by force, but by sacrifice. Things are heating up in the world. Things are heating up. And the same forces of evil that killed Jesus are behind the evil that we're seeing unleashed all over the world now. They're the same. And you see, that's the hard thing. Love from below recognises who the real enemy is. Love from below recognises that ISIL or ISIS are not our enemies. That people of other religions are not our enemies. Love from below recognises we have only one enemy, the same one. Just as Jesus recognised that the people who killed him were not his enemies. That's why he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Jesus recognised they weren't his enemies. He knew who was really behind this. Satan. And that's the only enemy we have. Love from below enables us to say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And therefore, present something very different to what everyone else is doing. When everyone else cries revenge, followers of Jesus who truly embrace his love from below cry love. When others are bound by fear and hopelessness, we cry hope and peace. But there's one more thing I just want to say about this love from below. And there's one line, the final line in that amazing hymn by Isaac Watts. I think the language sits well in the 18th century, and we know the intent behind it. A love so amazing, so divine, our only response can be to give our all. And that's exactly what I've been saying. But the word demand can be misconstrued. It demands my soul, my life, my all. We know exactly what this amazing hymn writer and theologian was saying in the context of his time and what he meant. But there's another sense with this love that we're talking about. This love of God doesn't demand anything of us. It's given freely, with our absolute freedom to choose to embrace this love and live fully and grow in our capacity to live out of love from below, or to reject us. The love of Jesus on the cross didn't demand anything. It was given freely and fully. Let's, this Easter, survey the cross in the context of God's broader plan, and it's not finished yet. Because when Easter goes and we see whatever comes across our TV screens, we remember this doesn't have the last word, because God brought love to earth and it's still here. When we're in situations where we think this is hopeless, situations which stress us in our work and life and family, we know because of God's greater plan that's still unfolding, this does not have the last word. It's a love so amazing, so divine. And God's plan is still unfolding, and we're still part of it. We are still part of it.